My name is Bessie, and I'm 65 years old. Right now, I'm sitting alone in this tiny downtown apartment, surrounded by the few belongings my daughter let me take when she kicked me out 3 weeks ago. Amanda thinks I'm poor, useless, a burden she can't afford to carry anymore. She has no idea about the secret I've been keeping for 8 years, the one that could change everything between us. The hurt in my chest isn't just from losing my home with her family. It's from realizing that my own daughter sees me as nothing more than dead weight. Before I share what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear how sometimes the people closest to us see us in ways we never imagined. Now let me tell you about the day everything changed. To understand how I ended up here, you need to know about the life I built before everything fell apart. For 40 years, I taught second grade at Lincoln Elementary School. Those children were my world, their bright faces and eager questions filling every day with purpose. I loved watching them discover reading, seeing their eyes light up when letters became words and words became stories. I married my college sweetheart Robert when I was 22. He was studying engineering while I pursued education. We were the classic American dream couple working hard, saving money, planning for a future together. Robert had this incredible mind for numbers and patterns. While I was nurturing young minds in the classroom, he was building something amazing in the background. Our daughter Amanda was born when I was 27. She was everything to us. This perfect little girl with Robert's analytical mind and my stubborn determination. We raised her to value hard work, education, and independence. Maybe I did too good a job with that last part. Amanda grew up to become a successful accountant. She married Marcus, a corporate lawyer, and they had two beautiful children, Tyler and Sophie. On paper, they had everything. The suburban house with the white picket fence, good jobs, healthy kids. But somewhere along the way, Amanda started seeing me differently. After Robert died 8 years ago, I made a choice that would define everything that followed. I decided to live simply quietly without drawing attention to what Robert had left behind. I shopped at thrift stores, took the city bus instead of driving clipped coupons like they were gold. Amanda saw all of this and drew her own conclusions about my financial situation. The truth was, I wanted her to be self-sufficient. I wanted Tyler and Sophie to understand the value of hard work, not to grow up expecting handouts. So I played the part of the struggling widow accepting Amanda's occasional grocery runs and hand-me-down clothes with gratitude I didn't need to fake. I was grateful, just not for the reasons she thought. But living this way came with a cost I hadn't anticipated. Every time Amanda sighed when she paid for dinner, every time she complained to Marcus about the burden of taking care of me, every time she looked at me with that mixture of pity and resentment, a piece of my heart broke off. I tried to tell her once about 6 months ago. We were sitting in her kitchen after Sunday dinner, and she was going through bills with that worried expression she'd been wearing more and more lately. I said, "Honey, if you ever need help with anything financial, I might be able to assist more than you think." She laughed, not unkindly, but dismissively. "Mom, I love that you want to help, but you're living on Social Security. Let us worry about the big stuff." That should have been my moment to explain everything. Instead, I nodded and changed the subject to Sophie's piano recital. The explosion that tore our family apart started on a Tuesday evening in October. I remember because the leaves were just starting to turn, and Sophie had been excited about a school field trip to see the fall colors. The house felt tense when I arrived for our weekly dinner, but I assumed it was just the usual stress of homework and activities. Marcus looked exhausted when he answered the door. His usually perfect lawyer composure was cracked around the edges. "Hi, Bessie," he said, managing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Amanda's in the kitchen." I found my daughter furiously chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. Her shoulders were rigid with stress, and she barely looked up when I entered. Hey, Mom, dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. Tyler wandered in looking like he carried the weight of the world on his 16-year-old shoulders. Grandma Bessie, can I talk to you about something? Before I could answer, Amanda's knife came down hard on the cutting board. Tyler, not now. We'll discuss college after dinner. That's when I learned about the crisis brewing in their household. Tyler had been accepted to Northwestern University, his dream school, but the financial aid package wasn't enough. They needed another $15,000 for his first year, alone. Marcus had been passed over for a promotion and actually taken a salary cut when his firm downsized. Amanda's accounting practice was steady but not growing. The atmosphere at dinner was suffocating. 14-year-old Sophie picked at her food, sensing the tension, but not understanding it. Tyler sat silent, probably feeling guilty for wanting an education. Marcus looked defeated, like he'd failed as a provider. And Amanda, my beautiful, accomplished daughter, looked angry at the world. I don't know how we're going to make this work, she said, suddenly breaking the uncomfortable silence. Between Tyler's college costs and everything else, we're stretched so thin. And now, with Mom needing more help as she gets older, I set down my fork carefully. Amanda, I don't need more help. I'm managing just fine. She turned to me with eyes full of frustration. Mom, you're 65 years old living in that tiny apartment taking the bus everywhere because you can't afford car payments. You buy your clothes at Goodwill and eat canned soup for dinner. Don't tell me you're managing fine. Actually, I am managing quite well. In fact, if Tyler needs money for college, I could help with that. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Amanda laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Mom, please, I know you want to help, but you can barely take care of yourself. We're talking about $15,000, not $50 for groceries. My cheeks burned with embarrassment and hurt. I understand it's a large amount, but I have resources you don't know about. Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. Bessie, we appreciate the thought, we really do, but Amanda's right. This is a significant financial commitment. That's when Amanda lost it completely. She stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. This is exactly the problem, Mom, you need to face. Reality. You're broke and you're making our lives harder by pretending otherwise. The words hit me like physical blows. Tyler and Sophie stared at their plates, clearly embarrassed by their mother's outburst. Marcus reached out to calm his wife, but she shook him off. Every time we go out to dinner, I have to pay because you can't afford it. Every time the kids need something extra for school, it all falls on us because you have nothing to contribute. And now you're sitting there claiming you can help with college tuition. It's not helpful, Mom. It's delusional. I felt something break inside me, something that had been bending under pressure for years. Amanda, if you would just listen to me for 5 minutes, I could explain. Explain what? How you're going to magically produce $15,000 with what money, Mom? Your teacher's pension that barely covers your rent. I stood up slowly, my hands shaking with hurt and anger. I think I should go. Maybe you should too, Amanda said, and immediately looked like she regretted it. But the damage was done. I gathered my purse and coat while the family sat in stunned silence. At the door, I turned back one more time. Amanda, someday, I hope you'll let me finish a sentence about my finances. You might be surprised by what you learn. She followed me to the porch, her face softening slightly. Mom, I'm sorry for yelling, but you have to understand how stressful this all is. We can't support Tyler's education and worry about taking care of you too. You don't need to worry about taking care of me. Yes, we do. You're my mother and you have nothing. No savings, no investments, no backup plan. What happens when you get sick? What happens when you can't live independently anymore? I looked at my daughter. This woman I'd raised to be strong and independent, and realized she saw me as everything she feared becoming. Weak, dependent, a burden on the people she loved. I have more than nothing, Amanda. Much more. But since you won't listen, I suppose you'll never know. I walked to the bus stop in the dark, my heart breaking with every step. 20 minutes later, Amanda sent a text that shattered what was left of my world. "Mom, I think it's best if you don't come to Sunday dinners anymore. We need to focus on our own family right now." The next morning, I sat in my small apartment with a cup of coffee staring at the bank statement I'd been hiding for 8 years. The numbers hadn't changed overnight. $2.8 million in carefully managed investments, the legacy of my brilliant husband's foresight and frugal living. Robert had started investing in real estate and blue-chip stocks back in the 1980s, when everyone thought we were crazy to live so modestly on our teacher and engineer salaries. While other couples our age were upgrading to bigger houses and fancier cars, we were putting every extra dollar into investments that Robert researched meticulously. He had a gift for seeing potential where others saw risk. That little strip mall on the outskirts of town that everyone said would never succeed, Robert bought 3 units when the developer was desperate to sell. Those technology stocks that seemed too volatile for conservative investors. Robert studied the companies, understood their vision, and bought shares when they were still affordable. When Robert died suddenly of a heart attack, I was devastated in every way except financially. His investments had grown beyond our wildest dreams. The life insurance policy combined with the portfolio he'd built meant I would never have to worry about money for the rest of my life. But I made a choice that seemed right at the time. Amanda was 30, just getting established in her career, newly married to Marcus. They were both driven, ambitious people who took pride in their independence. I decided to let them build their own success without the safety net of inherited wealth hanging over their decisions. I also wanted Tyler and Sophie to understand the value of hard work. I'd seen too many children of wealth grow up entitled and directionless. If they thought their grandmother was just getting by on Social Security and a small pension, they'd appreciate the value of education and effort. So I played the part perfectly. I shopped at discount stores not because I had to, but because I chose to. I took the bus, not because I couldn't afford a car, but because I enjoyed the time to read and observe the city I loved. I lived simply because simple felt honest, not because simple was all I could afford. But every month, the statements came showing the steady growth of investments I never touched. Every quarter I met with Dorothy Williams, the financial advisor Robert had chosen before his death. She managed everything discreetly, reinvesting dividends, adjusting the portfolio for my age, making sure I was set for any kind of future I might want. Dorothy often asked when I planned to enjoy the fruits of Robert's labor and my own careful stewardship. "Bessie," she'd say, "you're living like a pauper when you could be living like a queen. What's the point of financial security if you never feel secure?" I always had the same answer. I was waiting for the right time, the right moment to reveal the truth to Amanda and help my family in a meaningful way. I thought that time would come naturally when they needed help and would accept it gracefully. Instead, my daughter had made it clear that she saw me as a burden, a problem to be managed, rather than a resource to be valued. The hurt of that realization was almost unbearable. I'd spent 8 years trying to teach lessons about independence and self-reliance, and all I'd accomplished was making my own daughter resent my existence. As I sat there that morning looking at numbers that could solve every problem my family was facing, I made another choice. If Amanda thought I was poor and useless, maybe it was time to stop pretending. Maybe it was time to live the life I'd been hiding from the life Robert had worked so hard to make possible. For the first time in 8 years, I was going to stop thinking about what was best for everyone else and start thinking about what might be best for me. The next day, I called Dorothy Williams and asked for a meeting. Her downtown office was everything mine wasn't, polished and professional, with a view of the city skyline. Dorothy, a sharp woman in her 50s, who'd been managing wealthy clients for decades, greeted me with her usual warm professionalism. "Bessie, it's wonderful to see you. What can I do for you today?" I settled into the leather chair across from her mahogany desk. I want to buy a car. Dorothy's eyebrows rose slightly. A car? Well, that's certainly reasonable. Did you have something specific in mind? A Mercedes-Benz S-Class, the newest model. Now Dorothy's eyes widened. In 8 years of conservative financial discussions, I'd never expressed interest in any major purchase, let alone a luxury vehicle that. May I ask what brought this on? I told her everything. About Amanda's assumptions about the fight over Tyler's tuition, about being told I was broke and useless. Dorothy listened without interruption, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. Bessie, I have to ask, are you making this decision from a place of hurt? Because $95,000 is a significant purchase, even for someone with your resources. I'm making this decision from a place of clarity. For 8 years, I've lived like I was poor to teach my family lessons about money and independence. All I've taught them is to see me as a burden. Maybe it's time they learned I'm not who they think I am. Dorothy leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. And you think buying an expensive car is the right way to do that? I think living honestly is the right way to do that. Robert always wanted to buy me a beautiful car. He used to talk about taking road trips in a luxury sedan when we retired. We never got that chance because he died too young. Maybe it's time I honored his dreams along with my own. We spent the next hour going over the practical details. Dorothy arranged for a cashier's check and helped me identify reputable luxury car dealerships. She also made a suggestion that would prove prophetic. There's a place called Prestige Motors on Oak Street. Very high-end, excellent reputation. I've sent other clients there and they always report exceptional service. The name sounded familiar, and after a moment I remembered why. Amanda had mentioned buying Marcus's BMW there 2 years ago. She'd been impressed by their professionalism and selection. The irony wasn't lost on me that I might end up buying my dream car from the same place my daughter had shopped. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself, with no budget constraints. At Nordstrom, I bought a tailored navy blue suit, elegant but not flashy. At the salon, I had my gray hair styled in a way that looked sophisticated rather than simply practical. I bought leather shoes that fit perfectly and a handbag that didn't come from a discount store. Looking at myself in the mirror that evening, I barely recognized the woman staring back. For 8 years, I'd dressed like someone apologizing for taking up space in the world. Now I looked like someone who belonged in the world, who had every right to take up space and make her own choices. The feeling was both terrifying and exhilarating. Tomorrow, I would walk into that dealership not as poor old Bessie who needed her daughter's charity, but as a woman with the means to buy whatever car she wanted. After 8 years of hiding, I was finally going to let myself be seen. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear, perfect, for the most significant purchase I'd made since buying my apartment building 15 years earlier. I dressed carefully in my new navy suit and felt a confidence I hadn't experienced in years. The cashier's check for $98,000 sat securely in my new handbag, representing not just the cost of a car, but the cost of 8 years of pretending to be someone I wasn't. Prestige Motors was everything I'd expected from Amanda's descriptions. The showrooms sparkled with polished chrome and pristine paint jobs, each vehicle positioned like a work of art. The floors were marble. The lighting was perfect and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. It was the kind of place where serious money came to make serious purchases. A tall, well-dressed man in his 40s approached me with a professional smile. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm James Peterson. How can I help you today?" "I'm interested in looking at the Mercedes-Benz S-Class models, the newest ones available." James's smile became more genuine. "Excellent choice. The 2024 S-Class is an incredible vehicle. Are you looking for any particular features or configurations?" For the next hour, James treated me exactly like what I was a serious customer, with serious money to spend. He answered my questions thoroughly, explained the technology features patiently, and never once made me feel like I didn't belong there. When I asked to test drive the silver S500 that had caught my eye, he handed me the keys without hesitation. The car was everything Robert would have loved, and more. The seats were like leather clouds, the engine purred with quiet power, and every surface was crafted with meticulous attention to detail. As I drove through the city streets with James beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy in a simple pleasure. "What do you think?" James asked as we returned to the dealership. "I think my husband would have loved this car. He always wanted to buy me something beautiful like this." "And is he here with you today?" "He passed away 8 years ago, but I think he'd be happy to know I finally stopped being practical and started being a little indulgent." Back at the dealership, James guided me through the paperwork with patience and professionalism. As we discussed financing options, I smiled and pulled out Dorothy's cashier's check. "I'll be paying cash." James's eyebrows rose respectfully. "Certainly. Let me get my manager to process this for you." We were sitting at his desk finalizing the last details of the purchase when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "James, we're here to look at the BMW 7 Series we discussed." My blood froze. I turned slowly in my chair and found myself looking directly at Marcus and Amanda. They were dressed in their usual weekend casual wear, Marcus in khakis and a polo shirt, Amanda in jeans and a sweater. Both of them looked like they belonged in this showroom, which I supposed they did. Amanda saw me first, and her face went through a series of expressions I'd never seen before. Confusion, recognition, shock, and something approaching panic. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I stood up slowly, my new handbag clutched in both hands. "Hello, Amanda." "Marcus." Marcus looked between his wife and me like he was watching a tennis match he didn't understand. "Bessie, what a surprise. Are you here with someone?" "I'm here with James," I said, gesturing to the sales representative who was watching our family reunion with professional discretion. "I just bought a car." Amanda's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. "You bought a car, Mom? What are you talking about?" James cleared his throat politely. "Perhaps I should give you folks a moment to visit. Mrs. Hartley, I'll have your paperwork ready for final signatures in just a few minutes." Mrs. Hartley. I liked how that sounded in this context, like I was someone to be taken seriously. James retreated to a discreet distance, but I could see other sales staff and customers beginning to notice our conversation. Amanda stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Mom, seriously, what's going on? Did someone bring you here? Are you looking at used cars?" "I bought a new car, Amanda, a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. I'm just finishing up the paperwork." The color drained from my daughter's face. "What do you mean you bought a Mercedes, Mom? Those cars cost like $90,000. $98,000 actually, including the premium package." Marcus made a strangled sound. "Bessie, I think there might be some confusion here. Maybe we should sit down and talk about this." I looked at my daughter and son-in-law, both of them staring at me like I'd announced I was taking a trip to Mars. Around us, the elegant showroom continued its quiet business. Other customers examining cars they could afford, sales representatives helping people make decisions that made sense. "There's no confusion, Marcus. I can afford this car just like I could afford to help with Tyler's tuition, just like I've been trying to tell you for months." Amanda sank into a nearby chair. "I don't understand. How can you afford a $98,000 car? You live on Social Security, you shop at thrift stores, you take the bus everywhere." For 8 years, I'd wanted to have this conversation. I'd imagined it would happen in Amanda's kitchen over coffee, or maybe during one of our walks around her neighborhood. I'd never imagined it would happen in a luxury car dealership with my brand new Mercedes being detailed in the background. But sometimes life doesn't give you the conversation you planned. Sometimes it gives you the conversation you need. I looked around the showroom, very aware that our family drama was beginning to attract attention from other customers and staff. James was maintaining a professional distance, but I could see him glancing our way with concern. Amanda, Marcus, perhaps we should step outside to finish this conversation. Amanda stood up unsteadily, still looking like someone had just told her the laws of physics had been suspended. Marcus took her arms supportively, but his own confusion was written all over his face. We walked out to the parking lot in silence. The October air was cool and crisp, and I pulled my new coat closer around me. When we reached a quiet area between the rows of gleaming cars, I turned to face my daughter and son-in-law. 8 years ago, when your father died, he left me very well provided for, I began. Robert was much better with investments than anyone knew. He started buying real estate and stocks back in the 1980s, and he had a gift for choosing well. Amanda's mouth opened, but no words came out. The life insurance combined with the portfolio he'd built means I have approximately $2.8 million in investments and assets. Marcus actually staggered backward. $2.8 million? Bessie, are you serious? Completely serious. Dorothy Williams has been managing everything for me since Robert died. The portfolio generates enough income that I could live very comfortably without ever touching the principal. Amanda found her voice, but it came out as barely a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? I tried to tell you, multiple times, but you never wanted to hear it because you'd already decided what my financial situation was. The hurt and confusion on my daughter's face was almost unbearable to watch. But why would you live like you were poor if you weren't? Why would you let me think you needed help? Because I wanted you to be independent. I wanted Tyler and Sophie to understand the value of hard work and education. I thought if you knew about the money, you might become dependent on it instead of building your own success. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. So when Tyler needed money for college, when we were struggling with the costs, you could have helped all along. I tried to tell you I could help. You both laughed at me. Amanda's face crumpled. Oh, Mom, I said such terrible things to you. Yes, you did. We stood there in the parking lot of Prestige Motors, surrounded by expensive cars and the wreckage of 8 years of misunderstanding. I watched my daughter process the magnitude of what she'd learned, saw the moment when the full weight of her assumptions and their consequences hit her. I called you a burden, she whispered. I told you that you were broke and useless. I said you were making our lives harder. You did say those things. And then I told you not to come to Sunday dinners anymore because we needed to focus on our own family. You did. Amanda started to cry, not the angry tears from our fight, but deep, devastated sobs. Marcus put his arms around her, looking stricken himself. Bessie, I'm so sorry, he said. We both are. We completely misjudged the situation. I felt my own eyes fill with tears, but I wasn't ready to forgive yet. 8 years of hiding who I was, 3 weeks of being treated like an unwanted burden, and a lifetime of teaching my daughter to be better than this. Amanda, I need you to understand something. I didn't keep this secret to hurt you. I kept it because I thought it would help you become the strong, independent woman you are. But somewhere along the way, my independence became a sign of weakness in your eyes, and my frugal choices became evidence of failure. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. What can I do to fix this? I don't know if you can fix it, but maybe we can build something new. James appeared at a respectful distance, holding a folder of paperwork. Mrs. Hartley, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we do need to finish the transaction if you're ready. I looked at my daughter and son-in-law, both of them still processing the revelation that had just turned their world upside down. I need to go complete my purchase. After that, maybe we can talk about what happens next. Amanda nodded, wiping her eyes. Can we wait for you? Can we finish this conversation? if you want to. I walked back into the dealership with James, leaving my family standing in the parking lot with 8 years of assumptions scattered around their feet like broken glass. As I signed the final papers and accepted the keys to my beautiful new car, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night Amanda kicked me out. I felt like myself again. The drive home in my new Mercedes was everything Robert and I had dreamed it would be. The car handled like a whisper, responding to every touch with elegant precision. The leather seats embraced me like an old friend, and the sound system played soft jazz with crystalline clarity. For the first time in 8 years, I felt like I was living in my own life instead of a role I'd created for other people's benefit. But the real healing started 3 days later, when Amanda appeared at my apartment door with tears in her eyes and an envelope in her hands. "Mom, can we talk?" I let her in and made coffee while she sat at my small kitchen table looking around the apartment I'd chosen, not because I had to, but because I wanted something simple and manageable. "I wrote you a letter," she said, sliding the envelope across the table. "But I want to say this out loud first." For the next 20 minutes, my daughter gave me the apology I'd been waiting 8 years to hear. She acknowledged every assumption she'd made, every hurtful word she'd spoken, every time she'd dismissed my attempts to explain my real situation. She talked about her own fears of financial insecurity, how she'd projected those fears onto me, instead of listening to what I was actually saying. "I was so afraid of becoming a burden to my children that I couldn't see when I was making my own mother feel like one," she said through tears. "I'm ashamed of how I treated you, and I understand if you can't forgive me right away." The letter she'd written was 4 pages of detailed apologies and promises to do better. But more than that, it was evidence that she'd really thought about what had gone wrong and why. Over the following weeks, we began to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty instead of assumptions. I helped Tyler with his college tuition, but only after he and I had a long conversation about financial responsibility and the value of education. I didn't just hand him money, I helped him understand the difference between a gift and an entitlement. Amanda and Marcus both apologized repeatedly, and more importantly, they started listening when I spoke instead of assuming they knew what I was going to say. We established new boundaries around financial discussions, with the understanding that I was an independent adult, capable of making my own decisions about money and lifestyle. The changes went beyond just our family dynamics. For the first time since Robert died, I started living like someone who had choices instead of someone who was grateful for whatever she could get. I took a cruise to Alaska that I'd been dreaming about for years. I upgraded my apartment to a beautiful 2-bedroom place with a view of the city park. I donated money to Lincoln Elementary School to fund their reading program. Most importantly, I stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. The woman who had hidden her assets and lived small to teach lessons to ungrateful family members was gone. In her place was someone who understood that you can't teach people to value you by making yourself small. Amanda learned her own lessons through this process. She started questioning her assumptions about other people in her life, realizing that appearances can be deceiving and that financial status doesn't determine someone's worth or capabilities. She also had to confront her own fears about money and security, understanding that those fears had made her cruel to someone she loved. Marcus, to his credit, completely changed how he interacted with me. He stopped treating me like someone who needed to be managed or protected and started treating me like the competent adult I'd always been. He also had several uncomfortable conversations with Tyler and Sophie about how they'd witnessed their parents treating their grandmother and what lessons they'd learned from that. The most profound change was in my relationship with my grandchildren. When they learned the truth about my financial situation, they had questions about why I'd lived so modestly and what that meant about their own expectations for life. These became wonderful opportunities to talk about values, choices, and the difference between what you have and who you are. Tyler, in particular, seemed to understand the lessons I'd been trying to teach all along. He worked part-time during college, even though he didn't need to financially, because he wanted to understand the value of earning his own way. Sophie started volunteering at a food bank, saying she wanted to help people who were actually struggling, not just people who were choosing to live simply. 6 months after that day at the dealership, I was driving my Mercedes to Amanda's house for Sunday dinner, a tradition we'd reestablished with new rules and better understanding. As I pulled into their driveway, I thought about how much had changed since that terrible night when my daughter told me I was broke and useless. Amanda met me at the door with a genuine smile, the kind I remembered from her childhood. "Hi, Mom. The roast smells amazing, doesn't it?" Over dinner, Tyler excitedly told us about his classes at Northwestern, grateful for the education he was receiving, but also proud of the part-time job he'd found in the campus library. Sophie shared her plans for a summer volunteer program, something she'd chosen because she wanted to make a difference, not because anyone expected it of her. Marcus asked thoughtful questions about my recent trip to visit Robert's sister in Arizona, treating my travel stories with the same attention he'd give to a colleague's professional accomplishments. And Amanda listened, really listened when I talked about my plans to establish a scholarship fund for future teachers. After dinner, Amanda and I sat on her back porch with coffee, watching the sun set over the neighborhood where she'd built her life. "Mom, can I ask you something I've been wondering about?" "Of course." "Do you regret it? Hiding the money for so long, I mean. If you could do it over, would you do anything differently?" I considered her question carefully. "I regret that my choices led to you seeing me as a burden instead of a person with something to offer. I regret that it took a crisis for us to have honest conversations about money and family. But I don't regret teaching you to be independent or showing Tyler and Sophie that happiness doesn't require expensive things. Even if it meant years of misunderstanding. Even then, you became a strong, capable woman who built her own success. Tyler and Sophie are learning that character matters more than circumstances. Those are valuable lessons, even if the teaching method was flawed." Amanda reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm still learning how to see you clearly instead of through my own fears and assumptions." "We're both still learning. That's what makes us family instead of just people who happen to share DNA." As I drove home that evening, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this place. The decision to hide my wealth had come from love, even if it was misguided love. The decision to reveal it had come from self-respect, something I'd almost lost in my effort to teach lessons to people who weren't ready to learn them. Now, when I drive my Mercedes to family dinners, I'm reminded that love isn't about what we can give or receive, but about understanding and respecting each other for who we really are. True wealth isn't always visible, and the greatest poverty is in our assumptions about others. Sometimes the people we think we know best are the ones we understand the least. The relationship I have with Amanda now is better than what we had before, not because there's no conflict, but because there's honest communication. She sees me as a complete person with my own agency and choices. I see her as an adult, capable of handling complex truths about family and money. And sometimes, when I'm driving through the city in my beautiful car, I talk to Robert about how our quiet investments grew into something that could change lives and heal relationships. I tell him about Tyler's success in college and Sophie's volunteer work and Amanda's growing wisdom about what really matters in life. Most of all, I tell him that his dream of taking road trips in a luxury car finally came true, just not in the way either of us expected. The journey turned out to be less about the destinations and more about learning to value ourselves enough to live authentically, regardless of what other people might think. The greatest gift wasn't the money Robert left me. It was the second chance I gave myself to be seen and valued for who I really am, Mercedes and all. Have you ever been in a situation where someone close to you made assumptions about your life that were completely wrong? How did you handle it, and what did it teach you about communication in relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family forgiveness and finding your way back to authentic relationships. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to start living honestly. And remember that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to make yourself small for other people's comfort. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always have the courage to show up as your true self in the relationships that matter most.